Hi there, everybody. This is Dr. Gibbs. Welcome to the Tuesday Live. I am your host, your local thyroid and hormone expert, and today I want to talk about the eerie similarity between hypothyroidism and menopause. And the reason I picked this topic today is because as I was preparing last week's, and I was talking about how thyroid dysregulation and stress both seem to really coexist um, with insulin resistance and make it really, really difficult to lose weight. And as I was prepping for that, I noticed that there are some really startling similarities between hypothyroidism and perimenopause and menopause. And I started looking into the relationships there because I've been through both and it feels like a very hard problem. So if you are not a physician, please keep in mind that medical evidence is not nearly as absolute as we'd like to think, and this is not meant to be medical advice, and you should consult your own doctor for any medical issues or diagnoses we may have. All right, so first of all, I'm just going to show you a couple slides because I was really shocked how striking these similarities are. So first is typical symptoms of hypothyroidism, which include fatigue, sluggishness, poor quality sleep, which results in not feeling rested. My personal experience was that would be that I had a terrible time falling asleep, even though I was really dead tired. I would go to bed, my feet would be so cold that I couldn't relax enough to fall asleep. And then I would wake up in the night repeatedly drenched in sweat. And I think we call that a hot flash these days. But anyway, that was when I was young and suffering with unrecognized hypothyroidism. And then weight gain in excess of calorie consumption. And then I just talked about feeling cold, icy hands and feet, and then hot with night sweats. Mental impairment, memory and learning problems, and then losing hair on the top of your head and on your eyebrows is where you lose your hair for thyroid. And then muscle aches, joint stiffness, and inflammatory joint diseases like carpal tunnel or frozen shoulder, GI problems, bloating, constipation, flaky, slow-growing fingernails, depression, menstrual problems and low sexual desire, and heart palpitations. And keep in mind, I made this slide for a totally different talk. But now take a look at the slide that has to do with perimenopause. So, perimenopause, poor sleep, insomnia, difficulty falling asleep, difficulty staying asleep, abdominal weight gain, hot flashes, which is basically the same as night sweats. If you have a hot flash at night, it's a night sweat. Memory deficits, short-term memory deficits, and then muscle pain, joint pain, carpal tunnel syndrome, and tendonitis. Adverse mood, major depression, PMS-like symptoms with menstrual irregularity, heart palpitations, and then add on vaginal symptoms. So when I saw this, and like I said, I pulled these out of two different talks, to put them together, and I started going, okay, there's obviously something very similar about these two, and I started thinking about it and looking into it, and I think really that the common link is very likely to be stress and cortisol. And I will tell you that both perimenopause symptoms, when you have them, and hypothyroid symptoms, when you have them, are extremely stressful. And both of those conditions are made worse when you have significant external stress. And so, how does stress work? And once again, like I said, I pulled this slide from a completely different talk. But what happens with stress is that your thoughts trigger feelings of distress in your brain: fear, shame, disgust, anger. And those emotions go into a different part of your brain and they trigger the release of what's called trophic hormones. So, in this case, adrenocortical trophic hormone, which goes to your adrenal glands and releases a whole bunch of cortisol and actually adrenaline too, which causes a whole lot of stress related symptoms, including high blood pressure, anxiety, and a rise in something called insulin resistance. And I went, aha, insulin resistance. What does belly fat come from? Well, it comes from insulin resistance. The other thing about high levels of stress and high levels of cortisol is that when you have a whole lot of ACTH being made, it actually cuts down or cuts off two other trophic hormones. One of them is TSH. You probably heard of that one. That's what makes the thyroid gland make thyroid hormone. And then LH and FSH, which is what stimulates your ovaries to make estrogen, and testosterone too, by the way, in the testes. So if you have too much stress, then you don't have enough of those other two. And both the low thyroid symptoms and the low estrogen symptoms are very, very similar. And it occurred to me that what the common factor is in all of that is insulin resistance, because thyroid hormone is very closely tied to insulin resistance, and loss of estrogen also very closely tied to insulin resistance. And so if you are looking to lose weight with either of those conditions, and you have significant amounts of insulin resistance, which is kind of a given, then you're going to have a lot of trouble losing weight. So let's just go over that and see what's going on, because this is another slide that I pulled out of a different talk, and it talks about stress, and it talks about what happens in stress, and it raises insulin resistance, it lowers sex hormones, it lowers thyroid, it increases belly fat, increases autoimmune and allergy diseases. Well, hypothyroidism is frequently an autoimmune disease. It increases indigestion, cancer and infections, high blood pressure. So lots of bad things happen when you have an excess of stress and an excess of cortisol. But let's take a look quickly at the thyroid, because this is, once again, the same group of symptoms, including hair loss, weight gain, constipation, exhaustion, inability to stay warm. But anyway, very, very similar in a lot of ways to what you see in a loss of sex hormones, which includes depression, trouble sleeping, trouble concentrating, increased belly fat, among many, many other symptoms that are here. So the common denominator is actually the insulin resistance. And I put insulin resistance under the category of hormone hell because it just has so many negative consequences if it is not managed. And how do you manage insulin resistance? So when I looked at this, and I'm like, okay, well, in low thyroid and in estrogen, sex hormone loss, there are so many parallels. And if you look at them, well, you've got depression, anxiety right there. You've got the obesity right there. And so it's like, okay, how much of what's going on with menopause and with hypothyroidism is the trigger of insulin resistance? And I actually think it's quite a lot. So what do you do about insulin resistance? Well, insulin resistance is a condition where your blood sugar will not go into your cells as easily as it once did. And in particular, your muscle cells, which are a big sink for blood sugar. As you eat carb-containing meals, your muscles are supposed to soak up all that glucose and then store it as glycogen so that you can move and have energy and run. So I was thinking about that, and I thought I would explain something that I came up with, which was funny and kind of interesting. So if you take the stress response, which is a very, very similar stress response, and I want to compare caveman stress response to modern human female stress response, or cave woman, I'll say. Because, so take your typical cave woman, or maybe even primitive Native American, where, say, the stress that happens is that your tribe's well dries up and you have no great source of water. So you have to move. You have to move right now. So the guys, they hop on their horses and they go off, and the woman is stuck, packing up your entire worldly possessions, strapping your baby on your back, and dragging a sled containing all your worldly possessions, maybe 20 miles a day, to the next decent water supply so that you don't die of thirst and starve to death. And so high cortisol triggering insulin resistance in that scenario is a good thing, because it saves your blood sugar for everything except your muscles, so that you can get on your sledge or whatever and drag it 20 miles with your kid on your back to the next clean water. Whereas the stress that a modern mom may undergo, or a modern any person may undergo, is you got a big presentation coming up at work and your boss wants you to stay late and finish it, and you don't have childcare, so you got to call your mother-in-law, and your mother-in-law doesn't like how you raise the kids anyway, so you've been fighting with your husband for 3 days over it, and you are so busy that you don't have time to exercise, you don't have time to prepare meals, so you're eating high carb, and you're not burning any of that high carb off. And so the insulin resistance is absolutely not doing you any good at all. And what happens is it packs all that extra carb onto your body as belly fat, because your muscles aren't working, you're not working it off. And that seems to be kind of the story, is that insulin resistance and that vicious cycle with cortisol to high insulin was a primitive survival response to help us when famine or war or the well dries up or whatever comes along, so that we can literally survive. Now that our survival is not in danger anymore, that primitive survival response is really, really bad. Well, okay, so then what can you do about it? Well, there's 4 major categories of things that you can do. And the first one is to reduce your consumption of processed food, particularly carbs and pro-inflammatory fats, and increase your protein, your healthy fats, your fiber, so that you don't have high excursions of blood glucose and elevated fatty acids in your blood, and increased fat storage and decreased fat burning, which is what's caused by that insulin resistance. Second thing is you can exercise, and there really isn't any shortcut for this, and this is something that anybody who has low thyroid and has perimenopause and has insulin resistance really can't get around. It's if you do not work your muscles, they do not absorb glucose, do not burn glucose, and you got problems. And even if you're eating pretty low carb, you still have fatty acids building up in your muscle cells, fatty acids building up in your liver, that if you will work your muscles, it burns those off and they become much more healthy. So exercise is number 2, and the right kind of exercise, because High intensity interval training is kind of the big buzzword these days, and it does have its place, but there is no substitute for zone 2, improving your aerobic energy burning capacity, because if you don't have zone 2 or aerobic fitness, you don't burn fat. You just don't. You may become more muscular if you do your heavy weightlifting and your high intensity, but you need the zone 2 in order to burn fat. Thing number 3 is sleep. And yes, thyroid problems, perimenopause problems, play hell with your sleep. And so there kind of is no substitute for getting those hormones balanced, but getting the insulin resistance part of things under control really does help. And if you are not, or if you're short sleeping, you burn more, you pack on more calories and you burn fewer calories. It is just a fact. It's proven in studies. So then the final one is mindfulness. So can you reduce your stress? Well, yes, you actually can, by mindfulness practices like meditation, like prayer, like physical activities that take you out of your brain, like dancing or working a craft or doing something like that. But truth of the matter is, all of these things that you do, it's like, how do you know what's working? How do you know what's actually reducing your cortisol? How do you know, I'm sorry about that. How do you know what's reducing your cortisol? How do you know what's keeping your blood sugar under control? How do you know if you're in zone 2 exercise? Well, one of the ways that I help my patients know those things is by having them wear a continuous glucose monitor. And I better explain, because in case you don't know what a continuous glucose monitor is, it's a tiny little electronic device that you apply to the back of your arm. And they were originally created to help type 1 insulin-dependent diabetics manage their blood sugar better. And it looks like this. So I'm gonna get rid of this slide so you guys can see this better. So it looks like this, and it sits there on the back of your arm. It links to an app on your phone by Bluetooth, and it tells you what your blood sugar is from minute to minute. And putting it on doesn't hurt, and it tracks your blood sugar for 2 weeks without you needing a finger stick or anything like that. More recently, a lot of physician influencers in the performance and longevity space have been wearing these and advocating for the use of these devices for optimizing your metabolism. And it gives you a daily graph, it tracks your highs and lows, and it allows you to track what the sequence of food that you eat does to your blood sugar, the type of food that you eat, what it does to your blood sugar, what the type of exercise you're doing does to your blood sugar, when you go to sleep late, when you get up early. It tracks all of that stuff for you, which is really, really cool. You can exercise, shower, even go swimming without disturbing it, and it lasts a couple weeks before you need to get another one. Now, you do need a prescription, but there are plans in the works for these to go over the counter by the end of this year, and you can actually get them, if you know where to go, without insurance for less than the cost of your daily cup of coffee. So if you do this, what are you going to find? Well, you're going to find out that sitting at your desk until midnight trying to finish that project was not a good idea. You're going to find out that when you decide, oh my gosh, I need to exercise, and you get on the Stairmaster and wear yourself out completely trying to burn fat, that it actually raises your blood sugar because your body thinks you're running away from something, and so it jacks your cortisol up. you're going to find that eating protein first covers up for a lot of carb intake and keeps your blood sugar from rising quite so high. So it's a really fascinating device. The last benefit of it is that it gives you accountability. I mean, it's instant feedback if you eat something that you should not have. And sometimes you'll be really surprised what shoots it up and what doesn't. So anyway, I have a new CGM program that is starting next week. Registration closes by Friday, and you can find that and sign up for it on my website at www.danagibbsmd.com/join us. And it is a really fascinating community. We share war stories. We put the device on together. So in case you're scared to do it, we're going to help you. And then as things go along, as you get questions that you have, then you come in the group and you ask. And I do little educational vignettes each week. And we go for 4 to 5 weeks. And then you can either continue or you can say, I've learned enough. I know what to do now. I don't need to do anymore. So that closes on Friday, and I hope to see you guys there. Once again, www.danagibbsmd.com/join us to find out more information about that program. All right, guys, this has been a presentation of the Tuesday Live at 5:30 by me, Dr. Dana Gibbs. There is lots more information available on my website, including information about the new CGM group. And I can't wait to start again with a new set of participants. So stay informed, stay empowered, and let's continue our pursuit of advancing thyroid and menopause care together. Good night, y'all.